Othmane was a 20-year-old student from Casablanca who dreamed of exploring the world. He loved the sound of English, the way it flowed in movies, songs, and books. But there was a problem. Every time Othmane tried to speak English, he struggled. Words didn't come out naturally. He had to think in Arabic, translate in his head, and then speak. By the time he finished his sentence, the conversation had already moved on. He felt stuck, as if there were a wall between him and fluency. One evening, after another frustrating day in his English class, Othmane decided to ask his uncle Rashid for advice. Rashid had lived in London for many years and spoke English as easily as he spoke Arabic. Othmane envied his confidence. "Uncle, how did you become so fluent? Did you memorize all the grammar rules? Or learn thousands of words?" Rashid smiled and shook his head. "It's not about rules or memorizing words, Othmane. It's about how you think. If you want to speak English fluently, you must think in English." "Think in English?" Othmane asked, confused. "How do I do that?" Rashid leaned back in his chair and explained, "Start small. Describe your daily life in English, even if it's just in your head. Don't worry about making mistakes. Speak to yourself, write your thoughts in English, and surround yourself with the language. At first, it will feel strange, but soon, it will become natural." The experiment. Othmane decided to try. The next morning, he woke up with a mission: to think in English. As he got out of bed, he looked around his room and named everything he saw. Bed, window, desk, book. He picked up his favorite notebook and said, "This is my notebook. I use it to write." At first, it felt awkward. His thoughts were slow, and he kept slipping back into Arabic. But he didn't give up. As he ate breakfast, he tried to describe what he was doing. "I am eating bread. The tea is hot. It smells good." When he went to class, he imagined conversations in English. If a friend said hello, he thought about how he would reply in English. "Hi, how are you?" "I am fine, thank you." Even though he couldn't always say it out loud, the words were starting to form in his mind. Surrounding himself with English. Othmane also took Rashid's advice to surround himself with English. He changed the language on his phone to English, so every time he checked his messages or used an app, he was practicing. He started watching movies with English subtitles, listening to English podcasts, and singing along to English songs. He didn't understand every word at first, but he focused on the rhythm and flow of the language. He also downloaded a journaling app and began writing about his day in English. At first, his sentences were simple. "Today was a good day. I went to class. I ate lunch with my friends." But over time, they became more detailed. "Today was a bit stressful. I had a math test, and it was difficult. After class, I went to the cafe and drank coffee. It helped me relax." The more he practiced, the more comfortable he became. Words and phrases in English started to pop into his mind without him having to translate. The breakthrough. One day, Othmane was sitting in a cafe when a tourist walked in. She looked lost and was holding a map. She approached Othmane and asked, "Excuse me, can you help me find the Hassan II mosque?" Normally, Othmane would have panicked. He would have thought of what to say in Arabic, tried to translate it, and then stumbled through his response. But this time, something amazing happened. Without hesitation, he smiled and said, "Yes, of course. It's about 10 minutes from here. Go straight, then turn left at the big fountain. You'll see it in front of you." The tourist thanked him and left. Othmane sat back in his chair, stunned. He had spoken English fluently, without overthinking. The words had come naturally, as if his brain had switched to English mode. Living in English. From that day on, Othmane noticed a huge change. Thinking in English became second nature. When he looked at a tree, he didn't think first, he thought tree. When he listened to music, he found himself understanding the lyrics without needing translations. From that day on, Othmane noticed a huge change. Thinking in English became second nature. When he looked at a tree, he didn't think first, he thought tree. When he listened to music, he found himself understanding the lyrics without needing translations. His friends and family noticed the difference too. His English teacher praised his progress, and his classmates started asking him for tips. Othmane felt proud, but he knew the real key to his success. He had stopped translating and started thinking in English. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Now, every time he met someone learning a new language, he gave them the same advice Rashid had given him. Turn on the English switch in your mind and never turn it off. Months passed, and Othmane's confidence in English continued to grow. One day, while scrolling through his emails, he saw a message from his university. It was an invitation to apply for an international exchange program in Canada. The program promised students the chance to study abroad for 6 months, improve their English, and experience a new culture. Othmane felt a rush of excitement, but then doubt crept in. Am I ready for this? He wondered. The application required an essay in English and a live interview with the program coordinators. Writing the essay didn't scare him, but the thought of speaking English during the interview made his palms sweat. The Essay Challenge. Determined to try, Othmane sat down to write his essay. He titled it Why I Want to Study in Canada and poured his heart into it. He wrote about his passion for learning languages, his dream of exploring the world, and how improving his English would open doors for him in the future. When he finished the essay, he asked his uncle Rashid to review it. Rashid read it carefully and smiled. This is excellent, Othmane, he said. Your ideas are clear, and your English is improving every day. Just fix a few small mistakes here and there, and you're good to go. Othmane spent the next 2 days perfecting his essay before submitting it. The interview nerves. The interview nerves. To prepare, Othmane practiced every day. He stood in front of the mirror and asked himself questions like, why do you want to study in Canada, and what are your goals for the future? He answered in English, trying to sound confident and natural. Rashid also helped him practice. They role-played the interview, with Rashid pretending to be the coordinator. Whenever Othmane hesitated, Rashid encouraged him, saying, take your time. Remember, it's okay to pause and think. The big day. The day of the interview finally arrived. Othmane, dressed in his best shirt, sat in front of his computer, and took a deep breath. The video call connected, and a friendly woman appeared on the screen. Hello, Othmane. My name is Jessica, and I'll be conducting your interview today. How are you? For a moment, Othmane froze. But then he remembered Rashid's advice, take your time. I'm doing well, thank you, he said, smiling. How are you? The interview went better than he had expected. Jessica asked about his interests, his studies, and why he wanted to join the program. Othmane answered each question thoughtfully, using the phrases he had practiced. At the end of the interview, Jessica said, thank you, Othmane. You've done a great job. We'll let you know the results soon. The acceptance letter. 2 weeks later, Othmane received an email with the subject line, Congratulations, Othmane. His heart raced as he opened it. He had been accepted into the exchange program. He ran to tell his family, who celebrated his success with hugs and cheers. Rashid was especially proud. "You've earned this, Othmane," he said. "Your hard work and determination have paid off." A few months later, Othmane found himself on a plane to Toronto. It was his first time traveling outside Morocco, and he couldn't believe how far he had come. In Canada, Othmane faced new challenges. At first, he struggled to understand the fast-paced conversations of native English speakers. But he didn't let it discourage him. He joined study groups, attended language exchange events, and even started volunteering at a local community center to practice speaking with people from different backgrounds. When Othmane returned to Morocco, he was a completely different person. His English was fluent, his confidence was unshakable, and his dreams had grown even bigger. Inspired by his experience in Canada, he decided to start a YouTube channel to help other students improve their English. He filmed his first video, titled How to Think in English, My Journey, where he shared his story and gave tips to his viewers. The video quickly went viral, and Othmane became known as an inspiration to language learners around the world. Years later, when Othmane was invited to speak at an international conference, he stood on stage and said, "Thinking in English changed my life. It wasn't just about learning a language, it was about believing in myself and opening the door to new possibilities. If I can do it, so can you." The audience erupted in applause, and Othmane smiled, knowing his journey was just the beginning. After Othmane's YouTube channel took off, his videos started attracting attention from people all over the world. His content wasn't just about learning English, it was about the mindset needed to succeed. He talked about his struggles, shared tips for staying motivated, and even made fun, relatable skits about the challenges of learning a new language. Comments poured in from viewers. "Your videos inspire me so much. Thank you, Othmane. I've always been scared to speak English, but you've given me courage. Can you teach us more about how to practice every day?" Othmane realized he wasn't just teaching English, he was building a community. He began hosting live Q&A sessions, where viewers could ask him questions about language learning, confidence, and life in general. One day, during a live stream, a viewer asked, "Othmane, do you ever plan to travel the world and meet your followers in person?" The question struck a chord with him. Traveling the world had always been his dream, and now he had the perfect reason to make it happen. The World Tour Plan. Othmane decided to organize a language learning tour. He would visit different countries, host workshops, and meet his followers face to face. It was an ambitious plan, but Othmane loved a challenge. He started by reaching out to his audience through social media. "Which city should I visit first?" he asked. The responses flooded in. "Come to Jakarta, Indonesia. We'd love to see you in Istanbul. Visit us in Mexico City." With the help of his growing network, Othmane began to map out his journey. His first stop would be London, the city where his uncle Rashid had lived for so many years and the place that had inspired him to start his English learning journey. London, the first step. When Othmane arrived in London, he was greeted by a small but enthusiastic group of fans. They held up signs that read, "Welcome, Othmane, and thank you for inspiring us." He felt overwhelmed by their kindness and support. He hosted his first workshop in a cozy community center. The topic was how to think in English, practical tips and exercises. During the session, he encouraged attendees to practice thinking in English by describing their surroundings, talking about their daily routines, and even creating imaginary conversations in their minds. At the end of the workshop, a young woman approached him. Othmane, she said, I've always been afraid to speak English, but after listening to you, I feel like I can do it. Thank you for showing us that mistakes are part of the process. Her words stayed with Othmane. He realized that his journey wasn't just about his own growth, it was about helping others find their voice. Expanding. The mission. After London, Othmane traveled to Paris, Istanbul, Jakarta, and many other cities. In each place, he connected with people who shared their struggles and successes. In Paris, he met a group of young students who wanted to improve their English to study abroad. They asked him to share his favorite methods for learning vocabulary. Othmane introduced them to the visualize and connect technique, where they imagined words in real-life contexts instead of memorizing lists. In Istanbul, he met a man who had been learning English for 10 years but still felt too shy to speak. Othmane encouraged him to start small. Talk to yourself in the mirror. Record your voice. Little by little, you'll find your confidence. In Jakarta, he discovered a school that lacked resources for teaching English. Touched by their situation, he donated materials and hosted free sessions for the students. The turning point. One day, while Othmane was in Tokyo, he received an invitation to speak at an international language learning conference in New York City. The conference brought together educators, linguists, and motivational speakers from around the world. Standing on stage in front of thousands of people, Othmane shared his story, how he had struggled with English, how his uncle's advice had changed his life, and how thinking in English had opened doors he never imagined possible. I've learned that language is more than just words, he said. It's about connection. It's about breaking barriers and building bridges between people, cultures, and dreams. I've learned that language is more than just words, he said. It's about connection. It's about breaking barriers and building bridges between people, cultures, and dreams. His speech received a standing ovation. After the conference, several organizations approached him with offers to collaborate. Some wanted him to create online courses, while others invited him to develop language programs for schools. Building a legacy. Othmane realized he could do even more to help people. With the support of his followers and partners, he launched a non-profit organization called Think in English. The organization provided free resources, workshops, and mentorship programs for language learners around the world, especially in underprivileged communities. He also began writing a book titled The Switch: How Thinking in English Changed My Life. The book combined his personal story with practical advice and exercises for learners. It became a bestseller, inspiring thousands of people to start their own language journeys. The future of Othmane's journey. Years later, Othmane stood in front of a classroom in a small village in Africa, teaching children their first words in English. He watched as their faces lit up with excitement and curiosity. It reminded him of his younger self, sitting in his room in Casablanca, dreaming of speaking English fluently. Othmane's journey was far from over. He continued to travel, teach, and inspire. For him, thinking in English was more than just a skill, it was a mindset, a way of life, and a bridge to endless possibilities. As the years passed, Othmane's impact continued to grow. His non-profit organization, Think in English, expanded to more than 30 countries, providing free resources to communities in need. Schools, libraries, and community centers were equipped with language materials, and volunteers from all walks of life joined Othmane's mission to make language learning accessible to everyone. The unexpected invitation. One day, while Othmane was preparing for a workshop in Cape Town, he received an email from the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. The email stated that Othmane had been nominated for the Global Educator of the Year award. This prestigious recognition was given to individuals who had made significant contributions to education and global understanding. Othmane was both humbled and thrilled. The ceremony would take place in Geneva, and he would have the chance to meet other changemakers from around the world. But he didn't see this as a personal achievement, it was a testament to the power of the community he had built. Geneva, a moment of reflection. When Othmane arrived in Geneva, he felt a mix of excitement and nostalgia. As he walked into the Grand Conference Hall, memories of his journey flooded his mind, struggling to form sentences in English, practicing with his uncle Rashid, and stepping out of his comfort zone to speak with strangers. Now, here he was, standing among some of the most influential educators in the world. During the award ceremony, the host introduced Othmane as a visionary who has empowered millions to overcome the barriers of language. When Othmane took the stage to accept his award, he delivered a heartfelt speech. Language is more than communication, it's the key to understanding each other's stories, dreams, and struggles. My journey began with a simple desire to think in English, but it taught me something far greater. When we help others find their voice, we create a world where everyone can be heard. The audience gave him a standing ovation, and many attendees approached him afterward to express their admiration. One educator from India told Othmane, "Your story reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place. Thank you for reigniting that passion." After receiving the UNESCO award, Othmane realized his mission could expand beyond English. He began promoting the idea of thinking in any language as a way to connect with different cultures. He launched a new initiative called World Voices, which encouraged people to learn and appreciate multiple languages. After receiving the UNESCO award, Othmane realized his mission could expand beyond English. He began promoting the idea of thinking in any language as a way to connect with different cultures. He launched a new initiative called World Voices, which encouraged people to learn and appreciate multiple languages. One of his most successful projects was a series of virtual language exchange events, where participants from different countries could practice speaking with native speakers. The sessions became so popular that they were featured in international media as a groundbreaking example of global education. Personal growth, the return to Casablanca. Despite his global success, Othmane never forgot his roots. On a quiet afternoon, he returned to his childhood neighborhood in Casablanca. As he walked past the familiar streets, he found himself standing outside the small house where he had first started practicing English with his uncle Rashid. Rashid, now older but still sharp, greeted him with a warm smile. "Look at you now, Othmane," he said. "From this little house to the whole world." Othmane smiled. "It all started with your advice, uncle. You told me to think in English, but you also taught me to think beyond limits." Together, they sat in the garden, reminiscing about the past. Othmane told Rashid about the people he had met, the places he had visited, and the lives he had touched. Rashid listened with pride, knowing that his simple advice had sparked a global movement. A lifetime of impact. As the years turned into decades, Othmane continued to inspire and innovate. He wrote more books, gave TED Talks, and became a mentor to young leaders who wanted to make a difference in their communities. His story was featured in documentaries, and schools around the world began teaching his methods for language learning and self-confidence. But Othmane's greatest joy came from seeing the ripple effect of his work. He received letters and messages from people who had started their own language programs, helped others overcome their fears, or used their newfound skills to achieve their dreams. One such letter came from a young girl in Brazil, who wrote, "Dear Othmane, because of you, I'm not afraid to speak anymore. I want to become a teacher and help others just like you helped me. Othmane kept that letter on his desk as a reminder of why he had started his journey. The legacy lives on. In his later years, Othmane returned to Morocco to open a global education center in Casablanca. The center, named The Bridge, was a place where people from all backgrounds could come to learn languages, share ideas, and celebrate cultural diversity. The opening ceremony was attended by thousands, including some of the very first students he had helped. As Othmane stood on the stage, looking at the faces of people from around the world, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. None of this would have been possible without one small step, deciding to think in English, he said. But more importantly, it was about believing in the power of connection. Together, we've built something that will last far beyond any of us. And with that, Othmane's story became more than just his own. It became a story of hope, resilience, and the endless possibilities that come from believing in oneself.